much, Chairman Casano, Chairman and Government Administration Elections Committee. Thank you for your time. My testimony is much in the same lines as my colleague Bob Valentine's. I also am with the Northwest COG. I'm an adjoining town in Litchfield. We do have a code of ethics in our ordinances, and we also have a policies and procedures, and we do have a board of ethics that works in the town of Litchfield. I agree with what my colleague has said as far as the one-size-fits-all. I don't see where the one-size-fits-all fits in every single community. The other day I testified, and what I mentioned was each community has its own issues, has its own personal hometown issues. It has a different, each one of them have their own, practically have their own form of government. Each of them have different sized public works departments, and on and on and on. I could go on for hours about the differences in each community. So the one size fits all does not seem to apply, and I don't think it would be a good solution to the ethics issue. Having said all of that, we as elected officials are not trying to avoid the ethics issue. All of us who are elected, or those who serve in our community of Litchfield, who are volunteers, do the best that they can every single day that they volunteer and do the work that they do in our community, and they are as ethical as one would expect. We do have members. I know there was a question about folks. We have conversations in our local community when someone has an issue, or there's an issue that's coming before, say for instance, the Board of Selectmen. We all on the Board of Selectmen know what all the other selectmen do for a living, and if there's something that comes up that could be some type of conflict, if they don't recuse themselves because they're not thinking of it, it is usually mentioned in the Board of Selectmen's meeting, and they immediately step back from the issue. So I'm here to say that the bill that has been presented, I think, is a bit too onerous to many of the communities, especially small towns like in the northwest corner. And I would be willing to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Senator Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Paul, and appreciate you taking the time to be here today. A question for you, given that your community currently has a structure set up for ethics. Is there any scenario that you could see where the State Ethics Commission could be helpful to the town of Litchfield by way of administrative support, investigation support, or is there a scenario where you would want to pass a particular case up to them to handle from start to finish?
Senator, I can't think of one. Since I've been the first selectman, I'm in my 12th year. I think we have had 3 issues that have come before the ethics board. 2 of the issues were, in fact, questions of whether there was some ethical standard that had been violated based on our ethics code. They were handled very well. They were forwarded to the Board of Selectmen to make its decision on what should or should not be done. We handled it in a very professional manner. There was one instance recently that was more driven by, I hesitate to say the word, but it was driven, it was a situation, and I explained it to Senator Casano yesterday. It was a situation where the town had given 12 acres of land to our housing trust, and we sold it to them for $1. And the legislature changed the law on how to transfer, sell, or donate property to people. And there was an issue. We had to come to the legislature and get a special dispensation, something that would say, okay, yeah, you did wrong, but you didn't hurt anything. We did that, but there was a group of people who don't want affordable housing built on the property, so they came to the ethics board and claimed that we breached ethical standards in our code. The ethics board handled it in a very professional manner, determined that it did not reach to the level of an ethics issue, and responded to them in the way that said, basically, this is not an ethics issue, there is nothing in our ethical code that has been broken here, therefore you have other options. You can go to planning and zoning, or you can go to this, or you can go to Hartford with the legislature. So I cannot think of an instance, as long as I've been the first selectman, where we would have needed to come to the state. And honestly, I don't know if that would be something that would be, I don't think it would work. If I could use FOI as an example, if there's an FOI complaint, what immediately happens, as I understand in my dealings with FOI, it immediately becomes an issue, and there's immediately going to be a hearing that's established, and you're already down the process, down the step of having to get legal assistance and answering the FOI to the FOI commission, which is the right thing to do. But there's no review of whether it's a frivolous complaint. And that would be one of the fears I would have if we have a one-size-fits-all type of an approach where it all comes to the ethics board. Let's face it, the ethics board, I don't believe has enough time to review every single ethics issue that would come before them and say, well, let's look at what the code says and let's see if it really goes against what the ethics code is before they would then begin a process of hearings and so I can't think of a time where Litchfield would need to have the state be involved.
Thank you. I suspect Director Carson has a good response to the frivolous complaint and how they deal with them, because I know that I've had that discussion with her on several occasions. So, for further clarification, a community like Litchfield has a system that is working, and thankfully you haven't had a seriously challenging situation that has made it difficult. Would you like or prefer that it be local option to opt into some regionalization or state ethics? Sort of three levels: locals operating fine, we want to stay just the way we are. Regional, like Goshen, they don't have a system set up, they would like to be part of a team effort, if you will. Or some communities may say, take it state, we don't want it. What do you think of that three-level option?
As long as it's an option for each community, I would agree with that. I have talked to Bob Valentine. He and I have talked about this quite a bit. I am perfectly okay with the regional option, but I would also like it to be an option to Litchfield because it works for Litchfield. But if it were to become regionalized boards of ethics, then I would look at it very seriously along with my board of selectmen and our town attorney and determine whether or not that would be our right approach. So that might be something that Litchfield might consider doing, is to move into the regional board of ethics and go that route. But we would want to look at how it's set up and how the process would go forward if there's an ethical complaint or something like that. We would want to look at the details. But I think that everything that has been addressed in the task force review, all of the criteria that says each ethics code should have, and I think there are 4 or 5 items in there, that is exactly what Litchfield has, and I believe that is what should be the standard.
Thank you. And one final question, if I may. You mentioned 3 ethics complaints in your 12-year term as first selectman. Could you give us a flavor of the cost to the town to deal with those? Were they significant legal costs or investigation costs? What was involved financially to deal with those 3 issues?
One case, sir, was handled within our community. Our town attorney was able to handle one. The second case, we had to bring in an outside attorney to deal and work for the Board of Ethics to review the issues and help guide them through it. So it might have been a couple of $1,000, maybe $2,500, $3,000 in each case. It really didn't cost much. But again, Senator, we didn't have something major. we didn't have somebody who was doing something that was costing the community, putting the community in danger, or costing the community large sums of money. It was just minor breaches that fortunately they used.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I want to follow up on that, Leo. We talked yesterday about the process. I think three of us are sitting and talking and going through this experience as council leaders. One of the concerns that we talked about yesterday hasn't been raised today is the local politics of an ethics hearing and the local pressure of an ethics hearing. And that's a real situation. I thought this is where the options come in, that you can determine whether you want to do something within your own council setup and your own ethics group, or you can refer to your regional council as an option. And we talked about maybe having options. And then Representative Lesser just talked about the $30,000 case. Litchfield doesn't want a $30,000 case. Most large cities don't want a $30,000 case. And if we know a case is that serious and that difficult, we have that option of going to the state ethics. And we probably would have to pay something into that, or how that works, but when she testifies, she can tell us that part. That's why I wanted you to wait to hear the problems that we have here. But we would have, everybody would have an ethics policy, even if the policy says that if I have an ethics violation, we will have a hearing, or we will meet the standards that have been established, or we will go to the regions. Second part that bothers me is I'm hearing the costs to the regions. I don't know why there would be a cost to the regions. They pay dues to the regions. That's part of the structure. If we're talking about getting that impartial hearing, just like courts will move a case from point A to point B, to do that, I think in some situations a lot of towns would be glad to move a hearing from their community to the regional board. And I would assume that among our peers in the regional council, there would be a group willing to volunteer to be a part of the ethics group, which probably wouldn't meet that often and deal with that. But we still have the state level if in fact it is a fiscal group. And so, again, my vision is that we will, when we're through this hearing process and so on, probably have that sit down with cost and CCM and ethics and work out something that is probably agreeable to all of us. And I think that we can do that because I don't see tremendous disparity in this, except for those who don't have any policy would have to have a policy. We have all unfunded mandates. Well, it's unfunded, but everybody should have an ethical base. So, just following on Senator Lawford's concerns, is a process like that possible?
Absolutely, Senator. I think a process like that would work. I think that a town like Litchfield, and I'm going to speak from Litchfield's perspective, that might be a good idea to have an option that if something is so complicated that my local board of ethics doesn't feel comfortable dealing with it for whatever reason. Maybe it's, somebody, as was said earlier by the board here, as we said, that maybe it's somebody who knows somebody else, or is connected to somebody, or is related to somebody else. Maybe that becomes so complicated that it would be a difficult situation for the local board to handle. We've not run into that in Litchfield, but to be honest, everybody knows everybody in Litchfield. As Bob said, when I leave my package store, it's already what we all bought for the weekend. So must have a party or something. So if it becomes complicated to a point where it gets a little too onerous for the local board, it would be a good option to go to the regional board. I fully support that and would agree with it. And if it really gets, I don't see why we couldn't go to the state board if that was necessary.
Yeah, and people, it's not just small towns. whenever you live in a small town or a city, if you go out to eat, you go to the next town.
That's-
If you want to enjoy dinner. Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming in and testifying today. And I appreciate the chair inviting you up in advance of the director to give your perspective, and she can address that. The way it works is you're up now, she'll come up later, and we won't get you back, generally speaking. So at the risk of stealing a little bit of her thunder, I was looking at her testimony and have a couple of questions. I want to get your reaction to a couple of things that is in her written testimony and get your view. You're here representing CCM, so it's a group of towns, and as you've mentioned in your testimony, it's 96% of the population of the state. In her testimony, she writes, a number of Connecticut cities and towns have faced budget-busting costs of $500,000 or more when faced with investigating and enforcing a single allegation of a violation. Are you familiar with, how many towns have, or how many times, she's a number of Connecticut cities and towns, do you have any idea of how many we're talking about and the types of figures that we're talking about? So you spoke to Litchfield specifically.
Yeah, I do not have an answer on how many communities, if I want to make sure I understand the question, sir. How many communities would have or have gone through budget busting or 50,000 or upwards of doing an investigation on an ethics issue?
Yes.
I would have to get CCM to do some research on that. I do not have an answer in any of the documents I have.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if we had more facts on that to understand what we're talking about in terms of numbers, and perhaps the director will have that as well. Also, do towns have any form of insurance that covers this type of thing? Like corporations would have E&O coverage, so errors and omissions by their employees. Is there something similar that towns can insure themselves to protect themselves against any of these costs?
Well, we have, we're protected as elected officials, against any type of legal issues that are, I don't remember all the details, but there are some protections for us.
As individuals?
As an individual being the chief elected official, if somebody sues the town, I'm protected under our insurance for the suit that is against the town. And sometimes when you sue the town, they'll sue the town and sue the first selectman. I'm protected under that. I don't know if individual communities have specific insurance as to protecting them for ethical violations. I don't think they would, but I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out for you.
Fair enough, thank you. And then lastly, the director goes on to say, creating a single municipal code of ethics will save municipalities money in several ways. First, municipalities will not face unexpected costs that can equal the cost of salaries, teachers, and police officers, because under the proposal, the Office of State Ethics will investigate and prosecute alleged violations. Second, the Office of State Ethics, as it does for state officials and employees, will provide no-cost education in municipalities. And third, the Office of State Ethics, again, as it does for state officials and employees, will provide free legal advice that potentially will save towns hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees paid to outside counsel. And I'd just like to get your reaction to that statement.
Coming from Litchfield, my reaction to that is I can't imagine where any type of issue that we would have with an ethics complaint go anywhere near those costs. If you're talking about, I can't speak for them, if you're talking about, I'm guessing, if you're talking about a Hartford or New Haven or Bridgeport, I would imagine costs could go up, but I don't know that. I'm not in one of those communities. But in Litchfield, I cannot imagine that any kind of investigation or legal fees would cost us in the range of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could I just, the other thing I would say is that what we should keep in mind is that the majority of the communities in the state of Connecticut are small communities. They're not the communities that might have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on investigations of attorney fees, unless it's something major. We just had a battle, in fact, through planning and zoning, a stop and shop, super stop and shop that they want to put in Litchfield, and we had a group called Plan that fought that. And we thought that would be a very, very expensive venture, and our attorney's fees are nowhere near any of those numbers.
Okay. Senator Chairman Tanner, and then Representative Smith. Then I had Representative Smith, Representative Tiller, and then Representative France.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up really on
Okay.
the comment that you made, I think Senator McLaughlin alluded to, is you know, here in the Capitol, when I was being a legislator, if I have a question about what I'm doing, whether it's a violation or potential violation of our ethics code, I can call up and get an opinion beforehand. And for instance, for me, I'm a lawyer, so I practice before various, you know, unemployment hearing or motor vehicle hearing. So I can call up and say, listen, if I do this, do I have a problem from an ethical standpoint? I can get an opinion and put that in my file so I know if anybody ever questions it later on, I can feel comfortable with what I did. Do you have that option now, if for the town of Litchfield, call up to the state and say, listen, we have something on the horizon, we're not sure whether it's really an issue or not, but we'd just like to get an opinion from you. Can you do that now?
I wouldn't go to the state, I would go to my town attorney and ask him the question if there's, will this cause us an ethical issue? I wouldn't come to the state, I would go to our town attorney. It depends on him, and if he said to us, gee, I don't know the answer to that, which I can't believe he would, but if it was something he had to do some research on, to come back to it.
You might be surprised. I mean, you know, as lawyers, we like to think we know everything, but we don't.
I used to say that.
So there's many questions that will arise that were posed to us. You know, is this an ethical violation? The advantage of having somebody like the Ethics Commission or somebody who deals with ethics on a day in, day out basis, who's familiar with the statutes, just, you know, they can point you right to the statute and say, this is the section, this is what we're dealing with, this is why it is or it's not an issue. To me, that gives a great deal of credence then to somebody who may be town council dealing with zoning matters and planning matters and easements, and all kinds of issues, but not necessarily ethics on a regular basis. Personally, I'd like to have somebody who's familiar with it and can give me an informed expert opinion. So, your thoughts on that?
Would we go, we have gone to the state for election issues, you know, FOI complaints, so it would be available source to us if that's what you're asking me, Representative. Absolutely, I mean, it would be available. But I've not run into the situation where we've had an ethical question where we've had to go to the state and ask the question.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And listen, I'm not familiar with. I'm not aware of that many issues in my towns where there have been ethical issues that we've had to or would have had to go to a state level as well. So I'm aware that they're out there, and perhaps they're in some of the bigger cities, but the potential is there for every particular town. And I'm not advocating in any way, shape, or form. I don't want to come across that way as a one-size-fits-all. I would just like to see, if this bill does go forward, that as part of the opt-in, opt-out portion of the town's decision, that they have the ability to call up and get expert opinions on whatever issues may be. Because it's nice to know before it becomes an issue whether you really think it is or it isn't. Because it's nice to say to somebody, listen, I called the Ethics Commission and I ran this by them and this is what they say. So if you want to go ahead, then go ahead. And I think you're on flying grounds, but just know that you at least have some backing. I think that's an important factor that I hope the committee will consider going forward, that we have some type of provision allowing our various towns and municipalities who may not have the budgets or the expertise to actually define and decide these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Cotillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Paul, for your testimony. I'm just curious, were you the first selectman when you first adopted your code of ethics and put your board in place?
No, I was not. But I was the first selectman when we upgraded it and updated it in 2012.
Okay, do you happen to remember when it was first put in place, roughly?
Hold on one second here. I have the ordinance here, and I believe a long time ago. See if I can find it here. It says ordinance 1-1190, so it was probably 1990.
Okay, so quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Do you know or recall if you know you were around it at the time in some other capacity? I assume you've been in on other boards and commissions, perhaps throughout the years. Do you recall why the town of Litchfield first decided that it needed to have a code of ethics and put a board in place?
No.
Okay.
You could ask Representative Greg Minor.
Okay, I just might do that. Could someone summon Representative Meyer in here right now?
This was the first selectman, I believe, back in 1990.
Okay, no, that's actually, in all seriousness, that's good. Because I'm just curious, it'd be interesting to know, because I know there are some towns that don't feel like they need a code of ethics or a board at all, and others who have taken the important step of putting one in place, and it'd be interesting to know how it came about. Was there some kind of ethical violation that gave rise to it, or was the town just being proactive and deciding, we should have this in place in case we need it?
I will certainly find out for you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd appreciate that. I'd also be interested in knowing what it costs to put it in place, because, we've heard, about the concerns about mandates and the cost and so forth. And I'm just wondering if the costs are in putting it in place in the first place, which it doesn't seem that it would take much to do that, or they're more concerned about the costs when there are issues that come before the board. We've heard about hiring outside counsel and that sort of thing, but it would seem to me that if you have an ethics issue and it has to be dealt with in some manner by the town, you're going to be paying some attorney to provide you counsel on that anyway. So those are the things that I'm curious about. But thank you again for your testimony. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noted in your testimony, Paul, that the CCM survey noted that there were 132 and 169 towns that currently had code of ethics as of 2013, and that several were in the process of putting in place code of ethics. Did you get any feedback from the towns that didn't have a code of ethics on why they had not put one in place, or if they ever considered it and decided not to, made a positive decision not to have a code of ethics? No, sir. I guess follow up on
That would be, I don't know if Bob Valentine's here, he might be able to tell you, because motion does not have any, you don't have a code of ethics.
There hadn't seemed to be a need.
There hadn't seemed to be a need. That might be the answer. I don't know.
that's my impression.
So we'll get that information for you from CCM.
Curious about that. And I guess I'll ask the same question Mr. Valentine responded to concerning the concern that's been expressed that if you have the Office of State Ethics take over, or the potential that that would happen, what the effect might be on the unpaid, elected, and volunteer officials that serve in towns like mine. Everybody's a volunteer except the mayor. You have the elected board of education, elected town council, and a number of boards and commissions, which is probably typical of many small towns. They're all volunteers, and whether we struggle many times to fill a slate, to now we don't have that additional potential. What your thoughts are on if other towns would struggle, that if there was a mandated that takes over, or if it was even an option, what your thoughts are on that?
Are you talking about the option of releasing the financial data?
No, I understand that part. I'm just seeing if the Office of State Ethics is taking over an investigation potentially, because you could have the real potential that somebody has an axe to grind with an individual and makes a malicious complaint as opposed to one that has substance. It does appear by the local municipality it's going to be a large cost. They do refer, and what that, because that option is there, you think people will be reluctant to come forward and serve because of that?
Yes, I do. We have the only elected officials that are paid in the town of Litchfield are the 5 selectmen, the tax collector, the town clerk, and oh my God, David T. Wilson, my treasurer. All the other elected officials are not, two registrars. All the other elected officials, which we have Board of Finance, we have Planning and Zoning, and we have Board of Education. All of those elected officials are not paid, they're all volunteers. And absolutely, I think that it would have an impact if there was the possibility that they could be before the state with the cost of attorney fees and debt. Absolutely, we would have a reduction in the amount of people. Like you, Representative France, we too have a difficult time filling our slate every single election period. We're already beginning to start it now for the upcoming November. We're already starting to find that people are not running again. So we have a difficult time filling these deals. So I do think we would have a
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Seeing none other, Leo, thank you. I'm just thinking of, as Representative France was asking, why do we have 35, and we don't need it because we don't use it. It reminds me, everybody in this room probably has sprinklers in the fire alarm systems in their home. Many of us got radar detectors. We hope we never need them, but we have them just in case. And if you don't have it and you get an ethical violation, I wonder how you deal with that, because you don't have a system. So do you make it up for the case, or do you just refer it to state? For those who don't want to, and most of those are probably the smallest of towns, and if they don't have anything, they're going to end up in the state because there's no other option for them. That's an interesting scenario for them to think about. So, appreciate your time today and yesterday. You're very dedicated to public service, both of you guys. You hear a lot, and we do appreciate your input and your thoughtful testimony. Thank you.
When are you going to give me an office somewhere?
Yeah. Come on my place,